I'm running the,
Yeah, he's our tech guy.
no, I'm the tech guy, but we've been trying to get all the videotape all these so that we can put them up online because some people get miss them or whatever. So I'm videotaping it tonight. And one day, when I have a little more time, which I don't know when that will be, it just takes a while to put them all together and then spool them up. And so I haven't done one, but I have recorded them all. So I'm John Williams, and I am your JPL NASA Solar System Ambassador, which it's a volunteer thing in the country. There's 500 of us, and we share the excitement of space exploration for groups like this, but also, I've been to libraries, I've been to summer camps, I've been to classrooms all over the place doing this, but that's not why I do this. I just love astronomy, and I wanted to share with you. I haven't gotten to in the past 6 months, but lots been going on. I think this will take about 20 minutes. There's quite a bit, so if you have questions, please ask. We can always skip through. So I'll try to answer what I can, and when I can't, we'll figure it out. Okay? Sound good? You guys aren't being very interactive. Sound good?
We'll figure it out what that means.
All right. So we're starting here on Earth, but they found a meteorite in Antarctica, on the continent. What's kind of cool is in Antarctica, there's white snow everywhere, and meteorites tend to be pretty dark. And so they find, in fact, a British group reported they found 36 meteorites this past couple months ago. They all range from little tiny flecks of dust that they find to a melon-sized meteorite. One of them that they found a couple years ago turned out that it has a piece of speck of stardust in it. And they know this because it's got a different chemical makeup than what we find here on Earth. Now you see me trying to figure out my phone here. I'm a tech guy and I have no idea how it is. And some of my notes are on here.
Oh, and John, at some point you gotta tell them that this is May the 4th be with you.
Yeah. Totally right.
Somebody doesn't.
I'm done.
Sorry.
I'm joking. I'm joking. This time. Anyway, so this piece of dust, it's like 1/25,000th of an inch, and they're looking at it under microscopes, and they found it's got a combination of graphite, which is a form of carbon, and silicate, which is silicon oxide type salt. But the only way this thing could have formed, according to the models, is in a nova. And the type of nova that this would be is like if there were white dwarfs orbiting a red giant, pulls off material from the red giant, and eventually it sort of, it'll poof. Yeah. Sometimes it blows the star apart. Many times it just kind of puffs out, and the star brightens, and they call it a nova. And the other thing that was different about this is they found high levels of isotope of carbon called carbon-13 in higher doses than what we see in the solar system. And so this really tells us if this formed in a meteorite that's here on Earth, it probably came before the solar system was created. So this piece of stardust is from far away and also very old. But anyway, that was kind of a neat thing. John talked about this a little bit, this John right here. How do you pronounce your last name? Astolos. He talked about this the last time. During the January lunar eclipse, he was like looking at it and saw a little flash, but he didn't get it on your camera, right?
Because I was actually focusing on the camera screen, so that meant I wasn't taking a picture right then, but I did see it.
But if you had blinked, you would have missed this thing. So note to self, don't blink during the lunar eclipse at all. And don't focus. Anyway, this little dot right there is 100-pound meteorite that smashed into the moon doing something like 38,000 miles an hour. Created a crater that they think is 33 to 50 feet across. That's the estimates of this object's hitting the moon. Anyway, pretty cool. Remember, don't blink. And don't blink, this is a collision that happened maybe 4.5 billion years ago. if you asked any planetary geologist, I think they would tell you that the moon formed when Earth, way back at the beginning of the solar system, when there was a lot of objects moving around, smashing into things, that something the size of Mars collided with Earth. They call that body Theia. That's one of the names for it. And then the ejecta stuff out there just kind of coalesced into the moon. And that's why we have our moon.
But Leonard's gonna bring up some other issues with that, because not everyone believes it.
Not everybody believes this.
Journalists always have to have two sides.
Yeah.
That's right. It's science, man. We gotta throw out these theories. Well, one of the theories that just got published was that the only way that, so the moon and the Earth have a very similar composition. If there was an object like Theia and all this ejecta was thrown out there and it recoalesced, you would think that this would be a combination of Earth and Theia. But no, we don't see that. We see a very similar composition. So what these guys and ladies thought might happen is that if there was a magma ocean, if the surface of the Earth at that time was molten, then, you know, Theia hits Earth and it just sort of sloshes everything out into space and forms the moon. And all of that would have been Earth material. Who knows? But, yes,
John,
sir.
this is, we just talked about this yesterday. It's controversial, it's new, but it's super important. I'm really glad you picked this to highlight, because there's many things that the giant impact explains, but people were always worried that the impactor had to be something that came from right near the Earth, had to be the same as the Earth, so the compositions of the Earth and the Moon stayed the same. This model, very complicated model, involving the magma ocean, says that most of the stuff that gets splashed off is already the Earth.
Mhm.
So it takes away the worry of well, what if the thing was, you know, looked like Mars? Does that mean that, you know, it could be right? Now, this is another piece of the model that shows why the giant impact is so compelling.
What else? This paper also talks about the angles that this would have to happen at. So like this was probably, if Mars or Theia hit head on with the Earth, then the moon would have just gotten whatever magma and all that, the molten stuff would have gone out. It would never have formed in orbit around Earth. So this thing had to come in from the side. It was a fascinating paper. I read it earlier this week. I thought it was pretty cool. So we have a postcard from Insight. Insight's landed on Mars last summer. Last fall. And it's been on Mars now. Now, I'll talk a little bit more about what Insight's found, but every lander on Mars has taken a cool picture of the sunrise and sunset on Mars. And this is Insight's version. It's a very pretty thing. This is my picture of what the sunrise looks from my house. You notice that the sun looks pretty big. The sun is only 2/3 the size on Mars, which means it's much dimmer. And this is what the uncorrected version. That's how dim the surface at sunrise looks on Mars. This is about 5:30 local time on Mars. And then about 13 hours later, they take a sunset picture. But this mass up here is one of the instruments. It's out on a boom. But you know, another cool thing that Insight has done is this is from Curiosity. There was an eclipse. You know, we had solar eclipse last year in 2017. We'll have in Chile this year in July. We'll have a total solar eclipse down there. Next year we'll have another total solar eclipse down in Chile, Argentina. But this is Phobos, the largest moon of Mars, passing in front of it's moving, starts here, goes to the middle, outside. I didn't put the video in, but I do have a video. Curiosity actually caught it after the sun had set. So that dimming in the sky is very, you see it?
Yeah.
That's from Phobos moving from the sun, in front of the sun as it sets. Pretty cool. And what's cool about, too, this is Insight. That's the little seismometer that's being covered out there. That dimming you see, they caught the same thing. Now, the more important story that you've heard this past week or two this is a seismometer, and it's covered up because it's a very sensitive device. They don't want the wind blowing against it and moving it, because that's what a seismometer does. It detects motion. It detected Marsquakes. Now on Earth, these Marsquakes are formed by plates sliding together or moving up and down together, plate tectonics. We have an active planet. Mars is a bit different, it's smaller, and it's in a process of cooling. I think these Marsquakes, they're very, very, very dim signal. And so they've detected these Marsquakes from the cooling planet. They've also detected 3 other signals, but they haven't really verified them yet. They've kind of thrown it out there as, well, we found some other things, but we haven't vetted it yet, which I think is an interesting trend that NASA has started to do. I think they're trying to do it to get scientists to go look at the data. I'm not sure, though. It's kind of an interesting thing to watch. We're moving out into the solar system. Yes, sir?
What's up with the thermal probe on InSight? Any luck with that?
I don't know. I'm sorry.
It's stuck.
It's toast.
It's stuck. I
Yeah.
don't know if they can fix it or not.
It's running into something.
Right.
It's a German built. Some of the guys going crazy trying to figure out how to get it working again. It may be, I don't know. That was weeks ago, so I don't know. I don't hear much about it. I think they're trying to make everybody forget it's there.
This is a subject of my new book that's going to come out before anybody except. So I'm always fascinated by how NASA fixes problems from far away. And there must be 50 stories, maybe more, successes and failures. Anyway, Gaia is not a failure. Gaia is a European Space Agency probe that's really out there to map the sky, stars, billions of stars. But it also sees things that are in our solar system, like asteroids. And it's mapped now 14,000 asteroids. Those 3 white circles are new asteroids we didn't know about. The yellow is, if I can see if I can remember this. So the white lines are the new, yellows are considered near Earth. And so some of these kind of approach the Earth thing. Now I'm not even going to talk about the planetary defense exercise that went on this week, but anyway. It's amazing to me that it didn't get construed like a War of the Worlds thing. Oh my gosh, we're going to have 2 years to clear out Manhattan. Anyway. So the oranges are in the main asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. The red from here out to the darker red, those are the Trojan asteroids. They're out near Jupiter. They have a harmonic with Jupiter. And so that's kind of cool. Guy also pushed back the date when the Andromeda Galaxy is going to destroy the Milky Way in 5 billion years. The Milky Way, the Andromeda Galaxy is our closest big galaxy. You can see it in the sky in the wintertime, in late summer, but it's moving toward us at about 110 kilometers per second. So it's going to take a while to get there. It's 2 million light years away.
Why is it getting away? Is it bigger?
Much bigger. It's like 2.5 times our Milky Way. I know this doesn't look like astronomy, but this is where, chemistry and astronomy kind of meet. So this is this is a microscope or microscopic picture of a piece of crystal that's maybe about the size of a human hair. Hayabusa landed on, well, it didn't land, but it collected some samples in 2010 from an asteroid called Itokawa. And in the journal Science Advances a couple weeks ago, they found that Itokawas, they returned these to Earth. It wasn't very successful, they didn't return that much because of some problems they had with the probe, but it returned some stuff. And now there's the Hayabusa 2 that's at, where's Hayabusa? Ryugu, and then OSIRIS-REx is a NASA mission that's going to Bennu, and they will all return samples. So we'll see if this is the same. Well, what's cool about this is with Itokawa, it's part of an asteroid class that is thought to have, it's in near Earth orbits. it's in the same kind of area as Earth as it orbits. Based on based on a new study, they think that maybe there's a big controversy. Where did the water on Earth come from? Did it come from comets? Did it come from asteroids? This kind of leans the scale toward asteroids. So we'll see. It's another big controversy in planetary geology. Cassini, which we re-entered into Saturn's atmosphere last year, August or last year, still returned science. And they got a new method, the planetary geologists did, and they were looking at why some of the landscape on this is Titan, Saturn's largest satellite, also has an atmosphere. But they were wondering why some of the areas have there is just a bedrock. And so they did this new analysis on it, and they find this 4,000-mile corridor. This area right here is of water ice. It's almost linear, so it just kind of wanders up. Now you're wondering how 4,000 miles. The United States is about 3,000 miles across. So this is, fairly large. They don't know why. It's a large structure, but something to look at. Something I thought I would share with you. Hubble has found, darn it, I forgot to bring my prop. Buckyball. Anybody heard of a Buckminster Fuller ball? Or it's Buckminster Fuller. It's a 60 carbon sucker-like molecule. Some of the biggest molecules they found in interstellar space, this is between stars, have been like 3 molecules. They're 3 atoms big. Not very big. Now they've found, Hubble's found a buckyball out in the interstellar medium. So the size scale of what can form and what's out there just went from 3 to 60. Again, a chemistry thing. Kepler 47. Anybody know what Kepler 47 is known for? Off the chance? May the 4th? This is the Tatooine planet. So in this star system, so Kepler is a spacecraft out in space. It's being decommissioned out, ran out of fuel, but it's been the biggest source of our known planets out there in the rest of the universe. And it's really looking at this tiny little bit of sky. Kepler 47 is something like 60 light years away, and they knew it had like one planet. Well, this is the main star, and then it has a companion. The big star is like the sun, and the smaller star is a red dwarf, but they orbit really close together. And scientists are always like, these planetary systems are not stable. So Star Wars is just science fiction. Tatooine, no way. Could it have 2 suns setting? But it does. Science continues to amaze us. But they found a 3rd planet that's Earth-sized in this. Now, these 3, this is the 3rd planet now. They found a big gas giant like Jupiter, a smaller gas giant, and then now a rocky planet. They think rocky planet. They're not sure 100%. But now this whole solar system, these 3 planets occupy space that this Earth would occupy. It's inside that 93 million mile deal. So it's a very tight thing. There's my May the 4th reference. That's the only one you get. Doing some more research in the chemistry realm. Back early in the creation of the universe, it was a very hot environment, super hot. Like no molecules could form because it was too hot. And so the chemists and astrophysicists and all these people get together. They wonder, well, what's the first element that would form, or the first molecule that would form? And they think it's something called helium hydride, which is HEH with a plus. So that HEH plus. And then from there, this molecule does not last very long, disintegrates into hydrogen and helium. most of the universe is made of hydrogen, so they found this first molecule, and
For those of you who don't know Leonard, he's my husband, and he wrote this book. And he's, been writing about space as a journalist for about 50 years. Actually, maybe 55, because he did start with a little newsletter in his neighborhood about space.
I sold for 5 cents.
entrepreneur.
Yeah. And
Made a bundle. Okay, well, I hate to tell you this, but you're a little bit of an experiment.
Yeah.
Because I have not done this particular talk focused on the book that I finished, and it's out next week. So you're hearing things that you can't tell anybody about.
Until Tuesday. Until Tuesday.
Well, until Tuesday or Wednesday, whatever.
Yeah.
So anyway, I kind of lived the Apollo program. And most of my life, I watched all the Apollo missions. But I want to give you some, this is the cover of the book. And this cover kind of signifies what's going on. This is not the United States going back to the moon. This is the world. Multiple countries have programs now that will land on the moon. China's on the moon right now. Things are changing, and the dynamics of the global space awareness campaign that I think the public is not caught up yet. It's going to be something that I think is very puzzling. Because this is not the US and the Soviet Union space race. This is a Sputnik event coming. One of the points of the book, I try to make the point that this reminds me a lot, when I was young, of the Soviet Union launching the first satellite. They were supposed to be over there on tractors, and they launched the first satellite, and the beep heard around the world was frightening, because it meant they have ICBMs that can reach the United States, they have powerful rockets. The next, after Sputnik, was they launched the dog. And you knew they were communists because they couldn't put the dog back down. So it was all, this is all hazy stuff. And our response to Sputnik, and this is the Vanguard blowing up on the launch pad, and they had a little grapefruit-sized satellite, and they called it the grapefruit-sized satellite because the Soviet Union's was 184 pounds. That's the only way we knew they were ahead of us, because they had 184 pounds, and we couldn't get our little grapefruit up there. But it blew up. So we've had familiarity with the moon for a long time. Jules Verne wrote about it, great book. It's fun to read even now. There's a lot in that book, and I explained some of it in my book, about how close he was about the Apollo program. Your first science fiction film in 1902 was A Trip to the Moon by a filmmaker in France, and it captivated people. He had motivated people to think about the moon and getting there. Then we jumped to 2001, an epic film. People forget that the astronauts went to Clavius Base on the moon, and why were they going there? Because that's where the monolith was found. And I'm telling you, the moon has many monoliths waiting to be found. And I'll explain what that means, because I'm not sure myself. As a kid, this is all I remember about going to the moon. Remember this? The honeymoon. Thank God we're as old as we. Okay, but that was also spousal abuse on TV in black and white. But this is a cartoon I found. My God, it's Alice Cramden. All right. Now, I'm going to explain this, and I'm going to try to get through it real quick. have taken trips around the moon dozens of times. I grew up in Southern California. I had my parents drop me off at Disneyland. I visited Tomorrowland. We're talking the late 50s. And it was an e-ticket to go to the moon. This is the TWA rocket to the moon. And I took this thing, I can't tell you how many times. I was lip syncing, by the time I was on the 15th ride with the guy talking about, and they fired flares off on the far side of the moon, and it was dark on the far side, but it exposed unknown structures on the back of the moon. And boy, that stuck with me. Unbelievable what that ride did to me. And I worked with the Disney people and got some new stuff in the book about that trip. But it was an e-ticket and it was pretty expensive. In the same time frame, we're talking late 50s, the Air Force and the Army were ready to put a military installation on the moon. They had plans. NASA was newly created and couldn't pull it off. The Air Force and the Army had all kinds of ideas of how to use the moon. Keep that thought, because they're coming back. Of course, as the young President Kennedy made the challenge to the country to go to the moon within a decade, reinforced this at Rice University. This is before Congress. Unbelievable challenge to a newly created 1958 NASA. And NASA at the time, those people looked at each other and said, can we do this in a decade? And the answer was pretty much no. They had to convince themselves they could pull this off. And at one point, Kennedy actually was going to work with Khrushchev. Maybe the Soviet Union and the United States can work together. This is some guy, Nikita Khrushchev. Big threat. Again, the Soviets are moving out. They're doing their own space program. Kennedy was trying to work some kind of deal. Khrushchev said, no, we're on our own. And they were. They had some really early successes with the moon. This is Luna 2. It was the first flyby of the moon, but it was actually supposed to crash on the moon and throw some kind of ball on the moon that had the Soviet markings on it. And Luna 3 went on the far side of the moon and made the first images of the far side. And it was big news. This is all big because the space race was really moving forward. The next thing the Soviets had done, they actually had the first lander to land on the moon and successfully take images from the moon's surface. And again, the quality, one thing that I'm trying to get across here with these pictures, wait till you see what's coming. I mean, these were historic pictures, and because we'd never been there, we didn't know what it was like. But things change over time. Lunikon, the Soviets put a couple of these rovers on the moon, drove around. Again, all robotic, but again, you got much more detail about the surface of the moon. For the United States, we had Ranger program, and it was more of a kamikaze type thing. It was designed to crash into the moon, but it was supposed to took these pictures on the way down as it hit. So we got early indications of how rugged the moon was, and this was all precursor type science investigations for humans going to the moon. Then we got pretty creative with Surveyor, a moon lander. This is NASA again. We had several of these successfully land on the moon. Some of the images of the leg of it. Lunar Orbiter really advanced because it was an orbiter, and it took a lot of imagery of the Apollo landing sites, the ones that we were selecting. So we were building up this cadence, and here we are, this year, we're celebrating the 50th anniversary of Neil and Buzz on the moon. How far have we come, and how far are we behind now? They had to train the Apollo astronauts. This picture I found, I don't even know where I got this, but this is one of the historic guys in lunar geology, Gene Shoemaker, teaching the Apollo astronauts how to do geology on the moon. Bring a hammer. I guess was a mess up. Big rockets to get to the moon. This is the Saturn V, you know, big rocket to get to the moon. And to put 3 people in lunar orbit. Now, one thing that the public, by and large, really didn't recognize, the Soviets were busy trying to make their own booster to put cosmonauts on the moon. This is the scale, kind of the scale of how big the vehicle was compared to the Saturn V rocket. Look at the engines on the bottom of this thing. That was a problem because this thing blew up over and over again. The whole Soviet moon program collapsed on its own failures, and so their Saturn V was kaput. But one thing that's always tragedy in progress, we lost. We were committed to get to the moon before the end of the decade, and things were clicking, things were coming together until this event in 1967, where we lost 3 of the Apollo astronauts in a fire on the launch pad, and that set the program back quite a ways. They had to redesign the Apollo capsule and understand more why that fire started. And so it took a while, but we picked up momentum. It was Apollo 7 around the Earth. Apollo 8 was a tremendous, almost a public relations coup, because we went a circumnavigate the moon. And that's where we got this iconic picture of the Earth. And the first time we started hearing about, how fragile the Earth was from the moon's distance. And today, we coined this the overview effect. Astronauts have, certainly a philosophical connection that they express, that many of them do, some don't, but some do, about just this, everybody that I know on the planet is right there. I can cover it with my thumb. And, it's a great iconic picture among other ones that Apollo 8 delivered, going around the moon and coming back to Earth without landing. And that was all preparatory to Apollo 9, Apollo 10, and then we get to Apollo 11 in July of 1969. This is my good friend Buzz's footprint on the moon. And this is one of those quirky pictures that hardly anybody ever sees, but there's very few pictures of the 2 of them out there together. Now Buzz says Neil took the camera, and that's why Buzz is always in the pictures. Neil, I don't know, maybe he did that, but anyway, most of the pictures you see is Buzz running around. But this is taken from the lunar module that landed on the moon, from a camera system mounted inside the lunar module, and that's a pretty rare picture of the 2 of them, putting the American flag on. We got bold in Apollo 12. We actually went to a surveyor landing site. We landed nearby because the whole point was to do precision landing on the moon. How close could we get to exactly where we want to be? And they landed this thing, just downhill, or uphill from where one of those early surveyor robots had landed. And they took the camera system, they cut off stuff to see how the moon's environment affected some of the material, and took it back to Earth. Of course, the big one that we all probably are more familiar with is Apollo 13, where things went really awry. Sort of in transit to the moon, you had a major failure of a system, and it blew out the service module, and it took mission control to coming together with all these people to make that mission come back to Earth without landing. So I'm sure you're very familiar with the film, but this was pretty tense times, and they pulled it off. Amazing group of people that work together as a team, and this is, you know, some people go, this is NASA's greatest success story. Pulling these people back out of the fire, out of the problems they had and brought them back. Anyway, we got more bold on the moon. We could do more precision landings at different places. We've got a little geology going. We got instruments on the surface. We started learning more about the moon. Different kinds of instruments. A lot of flag raising. In the book, I'm not going to go through it here, but there's a great story about the debate about having an American flag on the moon, because there was worry by other countries that somehow the United States was going to claim the moon. So there was a big debate, a lot of panels and committee meetings on how to show this was a U.S.-led effort, but yet we came for all mankind. We got pretty clever toward the end of the Apollo program. The last 2 or 3 of these Apollo missions had rovers to extend how far the astronauts could leave from the lunar module to explore different parts of the moon. Kind of fun writing these things, according to John Young. Pretty stark, but they went and did a lot of different kind of science on the moon. Jack Schmitt on the moon. One thing that I go to pretty good detail that I really got squelched a little bit in the book is the dust problem. This is the Apollo suits after they came back, I think it was the last, Apollo 17, the last mission to the moon by humans, and dust is everywhere. It's in the valves, it's in the suit, it's all over, and some of the astronauts have really commented that this is the biggest problem we got. You know, dealing with dust on the moon is something that very formidable. And so how are we going to solve that? There's some clues coming. Obviously, a lot of the Apollo astronauts were very geologists turned, astronauts turned geologists. So this is an Apollo 11 lunar sample, the kind of sample you bring back. Like John was talking about meteorites. You go to the place and you pick up all this stuff and you bring it back. And this gives you more of a clue about how the moon was formed. And here's just a little places that we went with the missions that were successful. Apollo 11, 12, 14, 15, 16, and 17. Apollo 13 didn't make it. Now, the thing that people forget, we had Apollo 18, 19, and 20 kind of on the books. And then once the Vietnam war was going on, and race riots, going to the moon one more time did not stop. So Nixon pretty much curtailed the Apollo program. There was much discussion about a lunar base, talking about using more kind of equipment that you could really expand an astronaut's exploration of the moon. But that was as good as they got. So Apollo 17, December of 1972, last mission. Gene Cernan, who recently died, Jack Schmitt's still with us. They were the last two to successfully walk on the moon's surface. And this is sort of a collage I found of the kind of exploration we've done in the past with robots, humans, China, other countries that have done lunar exploration. Now, in the news a few weeks ago, Israel tried to land on the moon with a robot. Well, it didn't work. It got down to pretty close to the surface, and a false command sent by somebody in the control center apparently shut the motors off too soon. They tried to reignite it, but it was going too fast, so it smacked into the moon. the thing that's not out yet, but it's probably coming, we've got some imagery of the crash site of this thing. Jeff Bezos, he's just had a successful flight of the Blue Origin rocket just a couple days ago. Another up and down flight. He's trying to create a space tourism enterprise, but he has bigger plans. He's got a whole host of rockets he wants to design, these last vehicles on this scale, but it shows you how big this rocket that he wants, because he wants to start a kind of an Amazon Moon Express. You know, if you're on the moon and you need water, well,
2-day delivery?
3. You know, this is, and there's something coming, nobody knows yet. I don't know, but something's coming May 5th. What day is it?
Tomorrow.
Somebody's saying that Jeff Bezos is going to make some dramatic announcement early next week. Maybe it's tomorrow, maybe it's Monday. But something's coming from Blue Origin about the moon and package delivery systems or something. I don't know. Another guy that's a billionaire that's very interesting to watch is Robert Bigelow. Bigelow has inflatable modules. He's also got schemes to put inflatable modules on the moon. He spent $150, $200 million of his own money in his own space program. He's done quite a bit of legwork on this, and we'll see. But again, NASA, he's working a little bit with NASA on some of the ideas that he's got. Another guy that's out there is, I don't know how many Teslas drove in here, but you know, there's Elon Musk. Musk is very interested in Mars exploration, but also is building a spaceship, starship, to go to the moon. And so he's got some plans for the moon himself. My guess, you know, my own interpretation of this, Elon Musk is great. I hope he does whatever he wants to do. Jeff Bezos, he's a businessman. I mean, up front, that guy has got some thinking about the moon that's much different than Elon. So I kind of count on Bezos to be the money maker on this one to the moon. Okay, my soapbox. Barb and I have been actually trying to find a soapbox. Does anybody have a soapbox?
We can make one for you.
Well, I'm not a wood maker. So I'm going to get one of these, but I'm going to do this because I do have some issues about the whole thing. About the whole thing. In the book, I had problems with the whole thing. Okay, I'm going to get on it. Okay, we got this guy. Donald Trump has definitely put NASA on the wavelength to go back to the moon. And recently, just a few months ago, Pence, as vice president, told NASA, we got to be back on the moon in 5 years. Okay, so NASA's saluted like they do, and they're working it. And they got aerospace companies working on lunar landers. All kinds of things are going on. So we'll see. Remember that picture? Okay. By the way, this is Jack Schmitt, the last man on the moon that's still alive. But that directive that Trump signed put NASA in gear to go back to the moon. Okay. My soapbox is, I've been here many times. I'm too old. I've seen presidents claim everything. We're going to do this. We're going back. We're going to go to Mars. We're going to land on the backside of the sun. Okay, whatever. It still takes political will and leadership. And I'm a survivor of 30 years in Washington, D.C. This is where it comes down. Capitol Hill, a lack of capital. They talk, and there's no money that comes with it. We just signed, supposedly, we're getting a $2 trillion infrastructure bill, right? We're going to spend $2 trillion. We got enough trouble going down to Coal Creek Canyon with all the infrastructure. So $2 trillion is going to be available. I'm sure they're going to move the mountains out of the way. I don't know what's going to happen. Anyway, there's a lot of money involved here. So I maintain that this political push is like Sputnik. China is very aggressive. They have a lunar exploration, humans on Mars, on the moon program. We're going to see much more happening in the next year, next couple years. They're going to build their own space station. They're going to have it operational by 2022. That's not to say that they can't kill their own astronauts. But, they're moving ahead, and this gets to this whole thing. When I was a kid, because at one point in my life when I was really young, I started hearing about, we have to go to the moon and show the Russians how capitalism works. Of course, the Soviets were saying, we've got to get to the moon to show how communism works. This is where we're going to be. This is going to be a economically driven, political, cultural event of China in the long-term programs they do. They do 5, 10, 15, 20-year programs on everything. And that's where I think it's starting to be shaky with NASA, the way the American politics works. So we'll see. Nixon was a benefactor of Apollo 11 mission. Kennedy. Here's the Apollo 11 astronauts after they were put in quarantine because we thought there were germs on the moon. In case they brought back something, we put them in there. They made them stay in there for a couple of weeks. Bush Jr. had a whole moon program. The bad part was there's no money for it. No money ever showed up at the trial. But he had a great program, and that's pretty much where we're back to revisiting his plan in a lot of ways. Obama said, the hell with the moon. We're going to Mars. Okay, trashed the Bush program. We're going to go somewhere else. We're going to an asteroid. We're going to go to Mars. Okay, well so now he's gone. So here we are. I think it's a new space race if you believe that we need a space program. This is where I am today. Back to the moon, this time to stay or stray. This is what's going to happen. And I'm afraid we're in the stray point. Things are going to get political, they're going to get financially consequential, we'll have some failures. We're already seeing some glitches in the bureaucracy of commercial space with SpaceX the other day blowing up their crew driving capsule. So we've got some problems here. And whether the United States is going to keep the pedal to the metal, we'll see. Got some big debates. There's a program. NASA's putting together a pretty good lunar exploration program. A lot of probes landing on the moon, trying to understand the moon better. Where's the water? We'll talk about that in a second. A big controversial element of it is the Lunar Gateway. So we have a miniature space station like we have in Earth orbit right now, but in cislunar space, between the Earth and the Moon. And that place can be where the Orion crew capsules can come up and dock. We can deploy probes down to the moon. We can also build up capabilities so we can land humans back on the moon. Internationals are signing up for this. Japan, Canada, Europe is keen on this. But I don't know if NASA is going to be able to hold this program together. And this is just a preliminary shot out of the cannon from NASA about what they want to do to get back to the moon and do it in that 5-year time frame that Pence has put NASA in. Lockheed Martin, they're over there designing landers. They already got a whole plan. Give us money, we'll do it in 5 years. This is what the aerospace companies are coming up with, all kinds of new ideas of how we can pull this off in a short period of time. One of the things you're going to hear a lot about, and maybe attached to the Bezos thing that's coming up tomorrow or Monday, that is Shackleton Crater. Turns out that's the place you want to go. And why is that the place? Because this crater may have lots of lunar ice in its, down below that never sees sun. So Can you get to that area, extract that material, make propellant, oxygen, water? Some people think there's tons of this stuff in a bunch of these craters that never see the sun. There's already plans about Shackleton Crater actually putting the moon base there, because you not only have dark in the crater with potential water ice, you also have parts of the crater that have constant sun, or almost constant sun. So it's a perfect place to put a base. So we'll see, but also keep an eye on these things. Something's coming. There's a lot of talk about how do you mine water ice on the moon that's in these darkened craters. There's already good schemes about using solar reflection and boiling material out. You know, this is a concept that the School of Mines here in Colorado have actually done some really interesting work on. So, you know, but again, these are cheap. That's cheap. You know, it's a picture. You can hire artists all day, and it doesn't cost trillions. So it's still going to be hard to do this kind of stuff, but the pictures are always there first. Now, this is no trespassing. Brand jumpers will be shot. One of the things I try to get in the book is the ethics of going to the moon. And, you know, it turns out, just like Shackleton Crater, there are places on the moon that are more valuable to be in than other places. That sounds to me like trouble. You know, it'd be nice to have a diverse moon that no matter where you went, you might have resources to do all kinds of stuff. Russians can stay over there, China can go there, you know, Afghanistan. You know, any country can do whatever they want to do. Okay, the lawyers are already there. They're ready to pounce on private ownership on the moon. The private entrepreneurs are going, we can't, if we don't have any guarantees that we can't make money on the moon, why do we need investors? We got to have investors to go do capitalism on the moon. The Russians are ready to jump in on a new outer space treaty kind of thing. We'll see where this is going, but the lawyers, this is going to be big. It's a collision, and I don't know what's going to happen, but it's a new thing to watch. You know, and it gets back to this: being on the moon in certain places is more advantageous than other places. So who gets there first? How much water ice is down in some of these craters? Maybe it's not a lot. So people are going to go, well, we'll take it, and we'll do whatever we want to do at the exclusion of other countries. So we'll see. Europe's got a master plan themselves, a moon village they're talking about. They got an architectural firm to already draw what it's going to look like from inside. 3D printing is already being tested to take the lunar material and create structure on the moon using the local resources of the moon. So the moon moves. We're going back for science as well. I'm short-circuiting some of the stuff that's in the book. There's a lot in the book about the science of going back. Collisional thinking. You know, are there clues on the moon about its origin, its own origin, and Earth's origin? Big debate still to me is, you know, we need more data. Maybe going back to the moon will help us sort that out. There's things called swirls on the moon, not sure. A magnetic anomaly, we're sort of getting down to what these things are. But there's still, the point of this is nothing more than, we don't know a lot about the moon. Just because we sent Neil and Buzz didn't mean we know it. And with all those Apollo missions, we're still puzzling over a lot of the sample returns. Using the lunar soil to make things, this is sort of a breakdown of the typical lunar soil. You can see a lot of oxygen, silicon. That's great for making solar cells. So I think to wrap this up, I think we're in this unique period of time. I'm still exploring what this means. We're getting pretty good at exploration. We're going to have a different kind of exploration that we all can participate in. You know, for the first time, we have GoPro cameras on everything. We're putting them on turtles. You know, they're all over. And so the whole thing of only a few people going to the moon, we're all going to be there. You can imagine in the next 5-10 years, virtual reality and the kind of immersive capability we're going to have at home to be on the moon with explorers, going to another place on the moon and doing exploration that we've never done before. The space station has turned out to be a good test bed for a lot of the kind of capability that we want to take to the moon, life support systems, particularly what's the long-term, you know, problem of microgravity. Remember, the moon is like 1/6 gravity, so you know we've got people that have come back from a year in space, trying to understand what happens to the body physiologically, muscular, bone, you know, evaporation of the bone, all kinds of stuff. We're learning a lot more. We know we need haircuts in space. You gotta bring music. Again, I always look at this, and I go, he's by himself in there, so I don't know if he knows how to tune that thing. We'll see. People bring up saxophones. It's going to be a nice setting up there. There's always a clown on board. Okay, and maybe the last couple things. The cool thing is technology constantly changes. And like I've said before, I'm never sure what this is the first hearing aid or it's the first attempt at extraterrestrial contact. I don't know what it was. But this is not the way we do it today. And I remember my mom. You remember this? She was always afraid to point it at something else other than the TV because it would explode something. So that's going to change. People are creative. Mark told me not to say that this is our new car. People are creative. We've got a lot of ideas. And we've gone into environments all over this planet and survived. The moon is not going to be any different. We know that the moon is sort of a footprint-friendly place. We've had people walk there and fall there. Okay, it's going to take a lot of time and effort to get to something of this scale. Maybe it's not going to be this scale. Maybe it'll start out something like an Antarctica hut. I don't know, you know. But this is what I said about moonwalking. We got to learn how to walk in 1/6 gravity. There's a great study going on away. How do you walk on the moon and not fall over? We have big plans. There's always this, in the book I talk at the very last chapter is really some adventurous ideas about coliseums on the moon. Again, artwork's cheap. Guy wants to build a moon temple. I mean, how contemplative could you be on the moon? Oh my God. There's an idea to create a lunar tether. We've talked about space elevators on the Earth and whether they are practical. On the moon, there's no air, no environment nearly as hostile as the Earth, with space debris around the Earth. But there's some pretty sophisticated looks at creating a tether system that you could lower things down on the moon without using rockets with a tether. So anyway, Japan has come up with an idea to make a ring around the moon using silicon, and you develop a belt of solar cells to power back to the Earth energy. Okay, so the generation that's coming, they're kind of ready. I hope you get a chance to read this book. I'm skimming over a lot of stuff here, but there you go. Thank you. Like I said, you're an experiment. I'm trying to go through this pretty fast. Anything that you'd like to hear more of, or that I should have covered, or what? Too much Apollo, people.
Who did your cover?
National Geographic. I mean, that was their design. And when we got that, we go, oh man, this is really a book. That was scary.
And your name is big.
Yeah, my name is big. Yeah, it's spelled, it's not Leonard Davis. That's always a worrisome thing. No, that was Nat Geo. But again, it was meant to, as I said, what are the themes? I had to send them all kinds of themes, and I said, look, this is not the U.S. and the Soviet Union. This is a multitude of countries around the globe that have access to the moon. It's going to change in our lifetime, and that's what she came up with. Anything else?
Any other questions or?
What do you think about programs like Mines has of space mining resources and how viable they are in our current time, or do you think it's something that should be more delayed?
Well, we got to do, I think the thing is, I try to, we're lucky, the School of Mines over here, every year they have a space resources roundtable, and they're bringing in the experts to look at lunar mining, Mars mining, asteroid mining. It's pretty real. I mean, this, in fact, it's going to be in June.
Yeah.
We're going back in June. We got a big conference. It's going to be the best one they've ever had because people have experiments, bringing new data. So I think the mining thing is fine. The problem is we have to land more of things like Surveyor, things that land on the moon and actually test the waters on the moon. How much polar ice is there? Is this something we've made up, by radar signatures, and it's not really going to be the consistency that we think it's going to be? It's going to be like concrete. How do you develop an economic strategy when you're not sure what kind of resources you're going to run into and how hard they're going to be to extract? So that's where we're headed. And, NASA administrators going, there's billions of tons of water ice. We don't know. That's hazy to me. It's good to keep people focused on it, but then you start getting into that other little caveat about capitalism and private sector use and who's going to, we're going to have to write the Outer Space Treaty to do commercialization of the moon. There's a lot of talk about if that water ice is there, can we actually toss it off the moon and make propellant out of it in cislunar space to go on to Mars or wherever you want to go. So is there an economic case that can be made for that? And again, the artwork is cheap. It's doing it in real time and the technology. It's going to be expensive.
What do they want to mine? Are there more rare earth elements there that we can, that makes it worth, economically makes sense?
Yeah, there is. I think there's there.
I haven't heard anybody talk about getting rare earths on the moon.
Rare earths on the moon.
I haven't heard that. I mean, ore bodies on the Earth form because of water.
Okay.
It concentrates minerals.
Okay.
And even though there is trace amounts of water on the moon, it doesn't do geological work. And so the prize on the moon is water. But it's mostly, as Leonard was talking about, it's to sustain people and for propellant. There was the ideas back in the 60s, which I was a big fan of.
Yeah.
Something I was excited about was the space colonies.
Yeah.
So you land on the moon and you throw the dirt up into space to build space stations and solar power satellites and
You have to have a mass driver.
the mass driver, yeah.
So
just the raw rock, the soil on the moon could have use. It's
Well,
easy
let me
to-
put it this way. There are people that speculate that the rare earths are there. And
They're everywhere, it's not concentrated.
I know, it may not be, and how much stuff do you gotta process to get anything of worth out of it? That's the key. And Jack Schmitt, the Apollo 17 astronaut, is always talking about helium-3 on the moon to drive fusion reactors down here. He's helium-3. It's there, but how much processing you're going to have to do to get anything of value. And then there's the other problem. we don't have helium-3 reactors down here yet. Now that's going to change because China is working. And there's new things going to happen there. So, I don't know what they're going to do with helium-3 reactors, but, we'll see. One of the things I put in that book, and I'm waiting, some historians are going to criticize me. I thought the moon is it's like the buying of Alaska. It's the Seward's Folly. We don't know enough about this wilderness area. And when I was finishing up that chapter, it struck me that I've always wanted to dive into the history books and do a little bit more understanding of Seward's Folly, of buying Alaska. At the time, the guy was criticized in Congress, like, this is the stupidest thing we've ever done. I don't remember what the dollar number was, it's in the book. But it was, and then gold's found and all this other stuff's happening. So I kind of try to say that maybe we're looking at the moon the wrong way. It could be a little bit now unknown territory. It could be people will call it Seward's Folly by trying to do economic things on the moon. I don't know what the payoff's going to be. But it's a down payment on the unknown. It could be a down payment on the future. It could be a down payment on a new economic strategy for space. I don't know. But, to me it's worth a shot. If we have the money and the willpower. And if we don't do it, the United States, other countries are going to go.
Since we've already been to the moon,
Yeah.
why is it taking 5 years to gear up to go back?
Because we lost the
We
blueprint.
forgot.
Yeah. People are dead. The whole Apollo, you're talking, back then, Jack Schmidt likes to talk about, the age of the typical Apollo mission controller was 23, 25, something there. And those people are retired now and are gone. And, we don't have the boosters. We're trying to recreate a Saturn V with a space launch system, a new kind of booster. And not that we can't do that, but there was no momentum. There was nothing there. We cut off the Apollo program and the space program took a dive. So, it's back to reinventing the wheel, on how to pull these things off. And then it's not the engineering so much. You still got to get the American public to buy into this thing. It's still your taxpayer dollars. At some point it's going to hit the fan. Somebody's going to go, well, why are we going to the moon? And that's why I wrote the book. What's there? Why should we even do it? And then you have a new political system with Trump and Pence that are really pushing NASA. And it looks like some of the money should show up. NASA's in a pretty good position right now. The bad part is, do they spend it wisely? Are we going to blow this thing and spend too much money trying to keep contractors happy and states happy with contracts, and this is part of the system. So we'll see. But we lost the momentum. So we got to reinvent it.
And we need the bucks.
And we need to vote.
No
What's
Buck
that?
Rogers.
No Bucks, no Buck Rogers.
One of the interesting things I wrote about back when we worked at Final Frontier together
Yeah.
was back in the 90s, it was like, well, we're going to go back to the moon and we're going to use the same stuff that we used for Apollo. So a lot of people thought, no, we're going to go to the moon again, it's going to look like 2001. But even since the 90s, it's been, no, it's going to look more like Apollo, and it still continues to look more like Apollo all the time.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. I think that, the thing I try to do in the book over and over again, how serious are we? Survive and thrive on the moon versus flags and footprints. You run around, put a flag in there, bring some rocks back, and we're happy. And is that what it is about? Maybe we'll redo that. I don't know. But this time it is to stay, but we have the great potential to stray. And to me, I can already see, I'm already hand-waving a lot of things. But here we go, one more time.
It seems like one of the biggest challenges is having enough energy there, because any of the things we want to do are hugely energy intensive.
Yeah. Remember, it's a lot of sun.
Yeah, but
No wind.
And we have,
take
Well-
a lot of solar panels.
well, no, actually, NASA, again, there's a kilowatt power project that NASA's got, it's a reactor. It's pretty impressive, and they got Los Alamos working on it. It's pretty much already ready to go. They're gonna actually, they were designing it for Mars, but now with the moon initiative that Trump's going, they're gonna try to piecemeal it and practice it on the moon. Apollo used RTGs, you know, for some of the power.
RTGs?
Yeah.
Just
radio.
for the science experiment.
Yeah, to run the science stuff.
It didn't stay long enough to read that.
No, but they're, you know, so we know how to do that.
Yeah,
And solar cells have become more efficient.
oh, yeah.
So I don't know. I'm not too worried about the power levels.
Back in the 90s too, they floated an idea of mining what's like the helium-3 stuff is on the moon, but there's another element called lithium-3, which they were thinking about using, and it sounds science fiction-y because there was something in Star Trek called lithium-3, but this was it's like a rocket propellant, like the stuff in the solid rocket boosters.
Yeah.
The big worry there is that you blast off the surface with all this dust, and it pollutes the whole place. But anyway, it was just, it's all these ideas.
One of the guys in Texas A&M has got a pretty cool idea. How do you center the solar or the surface around the landing pads? You get rid of the dust factor. You melt it, and you make a covering over it. And so, it sounds good to me. It's microwaves. You know, he demonstrated it at the School of Mines. I don't know. You know, you got to scale these up. I mean, this is, you know. The other thing that's going to happen that's really bad, these guys come up with experiments on Earth in a 1 gravity factor. No dust, they're in the labs, they're tweaking the dust. Well, this looks like it works. It's fine. Well, you go to the moon, different gravity factor, dust everywhere, 14 days sunlight, 14 days night, things go awry. You know, so I think the learning experience of going there and trying simple experiments on the moon itself is probably the only reasonable thing we should do as a precursor to building up scaling things, a much bigger manufacturing facility. You know, again, the artwork's cheap. You can giant tanks, and you still got to get it there. It's going to be not easy.
Well, and we won't be alone. Like you said, the Chinese will be there.
The Chinese may help. I don't know. They're thumbing their nose at us. You know, they got a
Hey,
plan.
Leonard, I just want to make sure everybody understands that, you know, your book, when did it go to press? Like last year or something?
December.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you're basing it on what NASA's real plans were, which has what, the 2028 landing date
Something like
in
that.
it? And so, to answer Susie's question, you know, why is it taking so long? Well, it's because of money, right? It's a pay-as-you-go. We don't have the national, I mean, the Chinese are coming on, right? But the national urgency to beat the Russians is not there. And what did NASA's budget peak at in the 60s? Like several percent, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Of the US,
It was a big,
4%, okay.
it was a big,
4%. So a lot of money, and a lot of people worked on it, and worked hard, and they got it done.
400,000 people came together.
Yeah. But now, it's, you know, I mean, the capsule that would go, not land on the moon, just fly out there, was started in like 2005. And the rocket was started in 2005. It's because NASA is doing okay. You know, we've had up and down years, but it's not like there's been a huge slug of money to do something new. So the president and the vice president want to have this 2024 landing, coincidentally by the end of their administration, okay? And it would cost billions of dollars more per year. I mean, like up to $8 billion more per year out of a $20 billion budget. So the first person who argued about this was, you know, Puerto Rico has what, congressional representatives?
Yeah.
He's like, you haven't fixed Puerto Rico yet. Why do you want to spend all this money on the moon? So it's, you know, there's a big tempest in the teapot right now about, I think it is, about landing in 2024. What's in Leonard's book, I think, is the more sane, long-term vision that NASA would like to get back to once this other problem gets solved because there's no money for it.
Yeah.
So the
Uh,
whole,
Go.
Okay. So the whole dynamics between Russia, China, and the United States. So I don't have a clear picture of the importance of that triangle and how
Yeah.
we're standing in relationship to what they're doing. And it sounds like we're constricted by finances. I don't know if they are.
Yeah. Well, you know, the China is going to go. I mean, we're by law. The United States can't work with China right now. You know, that's a law, and we can't do these special cooperative things. All I'm saying is that while we're still trying to sort out how to work with China, they're going to put up their own space station. They're using it like the International Space Station, which is to be international. They're inviting other countries, China, to come on board their own space station. At some point, that's got to be politically charged. It has to be a diplomatic agreement that maybe we can work together, you know. And, you know, one thing that's going to happen, astronauts are going to die in space coming up. Something's going to happen. We have an emergency declaration to try to help other countries. And that's one of the reasons why we have docking ports that are common. We got to do that with China. We got to really start working together. Because people are going to be stranded up there. A piece of debris goes to the station. They're living up there and they got on borrowed time. Who's going to go get them? You know, so there is already a UN rescue of astronauts treaty. You know, we already have put in place. So, but I think it's diplomatic. You know, the Chinese are going to take the ball and run with it. You know, they see an opening, and some of their stories that China puts out. Well, we'll be up there in 2022, and it looks like NASA won't be up there in 2024, so we'll have the only space station up there, so come join us. I don't know. At some point, it hits Congress, something's askew here. And, you know, we're going to try to keep the space station up there as long as possible, and that thing's already rickety. I mean, they had a power outage yesterday, a couple days ago, that was somewhat serious, but you know, something's going to happen to that thing, and we're going to have to deorbit it. You know, $100 billion.
Just send up more duct tape.
Huh?
Just send up more duct tape.
Send up more duct tape.
It's a joke.
Okay. Now you're in charge of NASA. Good.
Well,
No.
and then I want to say a couple of words about the NASA administrator.
Oh, I think, you know, some people don't like
I
him.
think he's good.
I've seen him in action now for the first time in Colorado just a couple weeks ago. I think he's one of the best guys that I mean, if he can try to pull this together, he's an ex-congressman, you know, political guy. He's running NASA. The guy gets up there with no notes and does this thing, and he's pretty good. I mean, I've pretty much heard every NASA administrator. He's pretty good.
What's his name?
Jim Bridenstine. You know, and we'll see. I mean, he can collapse like the rest of them, but he's pretty good on his feet. You know, and he cares. I think he cares about what he's doing. Seems to have a passion for it. He thanks you for your question. I always love that. That's how it makes you feel good. Thank you for your question, even though I hated it. Don't ask it again. I'll never call you.
Any other questions or comments?
Yeah.
So I was curious, kind of on that note and on the financial note as well, do you think NASA's going to try to be on the forefront of space exploration, or do you think they're going to continue to sort of subcontract to other companies that are sort of have a more vested interest in it or can somewhat financially sustain themselves?
Bob can answer that. You know, I mean, exploration is not just humans, but, you know, we've got a tremendous space science program, and they're on. When a decadal surveys are going to be done, when?
I think the question is really, you're talking about like SpaceX versus NASA?
Essentially, yeah.
Okay, so NASA doesn't build rockets. NASA pays to build rockets according to NASA standards. So it takes a long time, there's all the safety stuff. So like, you know, Lockheed Martin or Martin Marietta back in the old days, Boeing, you know, used to build the big rockets and capsules. Now, with the entrepreneurs, they're doing it on their own, and if they want to like serve the space station, they have to meet certain NASA standards. So it's really just the dynamic of how much does NASA control it, versus how much they just want to see it get done and will let somebody else take the risk.
Yeah, we'll see. I think, we may be seeing some explosion the other day of a Crew Dragon that Elon Musk was testing on the little pad out there, blew up. I mean, that was supposed to take 2 astronauts to the space station sometime this year.
It's gone.
It's a no-go. So he's got some problems there, and I think some of that is safety, risk avoidance. Entrepreneurs have a tendency to kind of cut corners to save money. And I don't know. I'm not saying that the government will spend 10 times what it should is the right way to go, but somewhere we're going to come up with something. Yeah, Bob's right. I mean, Lockheed Martin, like I said, they've already, you want to go on the moon in 5 years? We got the plan. We got our work right over here. Need some money. Okay, well, thanks so much for listening. Right.